Now that we've come up on the end of the first quarter of 2026, I wanted to do a few recap style videos. I have one that's going to be dedicated to new fantasy that I picked up within the first quarter. I will also have a best of, but for today I wanted to focus on some books that didn't quite work for me. The reason that I wanted to do this is not because I just want to rant about these, but rather it's kind of the opposite. I tend to, as I'm sure many of you know, when I love a book or I love a series, I tend to come back to it. I tend to recommend it pretty often. However, when I don't love something, it definitely comes to mind a lot less. In fact, I'd say on some subconscious level, I purge it from my mind. But that's not fair to all of you who might actually enjoy these books. And so this is a way for me to almost recommend books that I didn't care for. I will have them all linked in a pinned comment in case you would like to check them out. I am still going to be very honest about my thoughts for these. And on that note, let's officially jump into them. I am going to, in the same way that I tend to like to try to pick 3 to 5 books that did or did not work for me within a quarter, I am going to do that for these two. So we're going to be looking at only a few. One of them was a fantasy book that I was really looking forward to. I have at the very least enjoyed, if not really, really liked everything I've read by this author in the past. And this one was, for me, a big swing and a miss, and that would be A Land So Wide by Aaron A. Craig. I didn't know until after I read this that apparently it's a retelling of something, and that does check out because this author, that is a lot of what this author does, is retellings. And I've enjoyed the retellings in the past. So for example, House of Salt and Sorrows is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, but make it scary, basically. And I believe that was the author's debut. It feels a little different than some of the others, but I still had fun with it. Then we had The 13th Child. Really liked that one. It was, I thought, a great standalone. I really enjoyed the fact that the main character, it genuinely felt like she was developing really well over the course of the story. I liked the complexities in the dynamics between the characters. I thought it was exceptionally well done. It had some horror leanings, but I wouldn't say it was scary or frightening. It was more of like the aesthetic. Felt similar to some of the aesthetics that you get within horror books. So there are a lot of pieces, as you can see, that I'm kind of hitting at multiple times here, which is that the genre bender nature of the stories, and also, yes, there have been some retelling aspects of it. And this story was not firing on for me any level. I was intrigued at first. You have this society that it seems have become stuck in this area. They came here because there are these trees that are very valuable, but they're also very dangerous. But now there seems to be magical forces at play that force them to stay within this area. And this society is really old-fashioned. So then you're wondering, maybe there is some kind of conspiracy afoot. Maybe there was something where it was slightly more modern or more progressive, and then groups of people came here in an effort to go back, but they are trying to hide the truth from everyone. And also, supposedly there's monsters, but are there actual monsters? Or is it that it's just people that are trying to keep the conspiracy alive, to keep people fearful, and to keep them in this town? It's very oppressive to young women. And you do follow our main character, who is a young woman, who I kept forgetting was an adult because she acted like she was much younger. Just the way she would think and kind of talk, it would just feel really young. And there's a difference, I think, between feeling inexperienced in certain areas of life versus feeling young. She felt young. And then also certain plot lines, it would feel like we just sort of abandoned. It came across like certain characters were introduced and then hardly ever mentioned again, even though supposedly they were important to the main character. And then when the whole main story, I guess, goes, it was creepy in a different way. Not creepy in a horror-leaning kind of way. It was more of like, wait, am I supposed to like this person? Am I supposed to empathize with them at all? I don't know about this. So there's just a lot of pieces that felt in a lot of different places, and it just seemed like if publishing had maybe spent a little more time with it, they could have made those pieces fit together a little bit better. It just didn't feel like it got enough time to bake, and I was really bummed. And I really thought back, was it just my expectations because I've liked other things by this author, or do I think that it really was just that maybe this needed more developmental editing? And I don't think it was my expectations. I think it just didn't feel quite as polished as the other books I've read by this author, or just other books. So unfortunately it didn't work for me. But if this book sounds good to you, there's a chance that your mileage will vary very differently from mine. So maybe you'll actually really like it. I hope you do, if you do pick it up. Next up, this one, I gave it a chance. I was like, you never know, and unfortunately it didn't quite work for me. So it is a contemporary romance called Only for the Weak. Only for the Weak is a contemporary romance story. I pick up contemporary romance from time to time, and I feel that this is a genre that people love to make fun of. It's a genre that people have certain notions of and certain ideas about. And some of it, at times, is fair, and some of it is inaccurate. There are some that are slightly more rooted in physical intimacy. And with contemporary romance, you don't really know, unless you look into it ahead of time, you don't really know what you're getting into until you get into it. And of course, I could easily look into stuff more, but a lot of you know, I try to, as much as possible, have that experience a lot of us had as kids, and if you're of a certain age, before the internet, and you just kind of walked around and you looked at books and you're like, what's this? And you gave it a try. And I try to emulate that as much as possible. And also sometimes I just try to see, what does my library have, and give it a go. And that was the case with this book. I thought it sounded like it could be fun. The setup is that you have this character whose sister is getting married. She's actually getting married to her ex-boyfriend, which is a little awkward, but she is like, everything's fine. I really don't mind. I think they're great for each other. Everybody in the family is like, there's no way that you can be okay with this. Are you okay? And she's like, I am totally fine. And the sister is being very dramatic, and there's a lot of drama in general in the story, and it's a vacation wedding, so they also are... They're all the wedding party for 1 week. They're all hanging out with just each other, and then the week of the wedding, the rest of the guests arrive. And so the week before, when it's just the wedding party, our main character is losing her mind because her sister is just being kind of a bridezilla sort of situation. And one of the groomsmen is very attracted to the main character. She's attracted to him, and she's like, let's just enjoy each other's company until the week of the wedding when all the guests arrive. And let's not tell anybody because I don't want everybody to make a big deal about this or anything. And they're like, okay, that sounds great. He's like, it's not going to be for just a week. And she is thinking, it's just going to be for a week. And then shenanigans ensue. It was a lot of the physical intimacy side of things, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think for what this book is doing and the things that it's embracing within it, I think that it actually did a good job of those things. It wasn't a book that fits my tastes necessarily. I also want to mention that they do kind of tap into certain dynamics between people, especially family members. So there is that element to the story. I don't want it to come across like there's nothing but physical intimacy across the whole book. It's not necessarily that, but I don't mind there being some physical intimacy and some of it shown on page within a story. But for me, I just found that this one, the balance wasn't necessarily to my tastes, though I do think for a lot of other people, this is going to really, really work for them. And then the last one for today would be Sisters in Arms, and I would try something else by this author. And this one could be a case of marketing really dropped the ball on the book, because how it was presented versus what it turned out to be wasn't, I would say, very well tied together. It seemed at odds with that. So the marketing seems very much like it's going to be the story of resilience and perseverance, specifically following some Black women that were enlisted during World War II. And this was a real group of people I was very much looking forward to, within a fictional setting, of course, but I was very much looking forward to having my eyes opened a little bit to this sort of situation. I figured, because it's historical fiction, that it wouldn't necessarily be almost like a biography, but I did think that it would be maybe showing you a depiction of almost like these real women and their lives and what they were going through. It felt, if you were to take this idea of Black women during World War II who decided to enlist in the military, and you asked the Hallmark Channel to make a movie about it, I kind of think that's what this felt like. It felt surprisingly PG for what the subject matter was, and also, it didn't feel like it was even that much about Black women enlisting in World War II. It just kind of felt like it was about two ladies. And I also thought it felt a little modern as well, as far as how the characters behaved, how they spoke, their reactions to things that would occur within their lives. It also was an extremely meandering book. And I don't mind a story that just kind of follows characters as they live their lives, but I think that tends to work a little bit better if you have a really strong thematic thing and you're kind of showing that over the course of their life. Or if it's a really deep character examination or something like that. It didn't really feel like it was that. It really did just feel like stuff happened to these two women. Also, it's during World War II. Also, they enlisted. And also, they don't really get along very well. And come on, let's pull a little bit more out of it. And it wasn't that I thought it was terrible. I just don't really think that it was marketed properly. And again, I still do stand by the idea that it felt a little bit Hallmark Channel-y, which is its own kind of way of telling stories. There is a heaviness that almost feels like a necessity in order to actually recognize how challenging things were. And when you kind of put a little bit of sparkle on it or a little bit of a bow on it, it then kind of diminishes, I think is what I'm trying to get at. It kind of diminishes the severity of certain circumstances. And I think this is a thing I have with a lot of World War II books in general. I think sometimes World War II books that are more like World War II as a backdrop, it can just feel as though we're not almost recognizing just how intense these circumstances are. And I by no means want to act as though like, oh, we're rewriting history. I think in this book's case, the impression I got was that we're trying to show what feels like very real people that happen to be in this place and in this time. They happen to be women, they happen to be Black, in a time where being a woman and being Black, you were treated very differently, as is the case for many different time periods. So I think it was just trying to show them as human beings, but in an effort to make them relatable, it felt like we started to push out some of what would have been different for them at that time. So it didn't quite work for me. But I did see that this author, from what I understand, they like to zero in on people in history that their stories don't typically get to be told. And so I would be curious to see something else by this author, and maybe it would work a little bit more. That's it though for the books that worked for me the least that I picked up within the first quarter of the year. Feel free to chime in with any books that didn't quite work out for you, but if these books do sound good, as I said at the beginning, I'll have them in a pinned comment so you can check them out. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.